My name is Larry Hoffheimer, and I am the chairman and founder of the Macular Degeneration Association. My interest in this was primarily because my mother had wet macular degeneration and lost her vision in both her eyes, her central vision. And in those days, which was over 20 years ago, eye injections were not available. So my interest in the Macular Degeneration Association was to provide educational seminars for people around the country and around the world, for that matter, who can zoom in and participate in these webinars. They're very interesting, informative, and in many cases, potentially life-saving. So it's my pleasure to welcome our panel today and our presenters. And I think you're going to find them all very interesting. The Macular Degeneration Association is a voluntary health agency. It's tax exempt under the Internal Revenue Code. And I think you'll find that the work that we do is followed by hundreds of thousands of people. So without further ado, I would like to introduce our principal moderator today. Her name is Megan Blemker. Megan is an ocular disease residency trained optometrist. We practiced in Nashville for about 9 years before transitioning to industry. She was an executive clinical outcome specialist with Bausch & Lomb Surgical for 4 years prior to joining Rotovision 3 years ago, where she serves as Director of Clinical Affairs and Professional Relations. So it's now my pleasure to present to you Dr. Megan Blemker.
Thank you so much for the introduction. No-Tel Vision is proud to partner with the Macular Degeneration Association, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak to you all today. It is such a privilege. To reiterate some of the important points made in the presentation, I'd like to further discuss understanding the importance of early detection of wet AMD and how you can play a role in protecting your vision. Forseon is FDA cleared and Medicare covered. It's prescribed by your eye care professional when you have the appropriate level of vision and appropriate stage of age-related macular degeneration. It's a form of personalized medicine with the Forseon device used at home in between your regular eye exams. And it detects metamorphopsia or visual distortions in AMD. AMD is the leading cause of severe central vision loss in people over the age of 50 years in the United States. I'm going to share with you the information you need to get informed and take charge of your vision. AMD is a chronic, meaning it doesn't resolve or go away, progressive, meaning it tends to worsen over time, type of condition. And there are two types of AMD, dry and wet. Dry AMD is the slower changing, earlier form of the disease that puts you at risk for developing the wet form of AMD. And wet AMD is the sudden change or advanced form of the disease. AMD affects an area of the retina called the macula, which is responsible for detailed central vision used for activities like reading, driving, and seeing faces clearly. In dry AMD, changes occur in the cells of the macula, and drusen, or deposits, these yellow spots that you see here on the right side of the screen in the picture, build up in this area. And these changes may induce blurry vision, such as difficulty seeing sharp details both up close and far away. Dry AMD is the slow form of the disease, with changes you may not notice over time. Most importantly, dry AMD puts you at an increased risk of progressing to wet AMD. Over time, the size and number of these drusen or deposits can increase, which increases your risk of developing the more sight-threatening form, wet AMD. Again, dry AMD can suddenly change to wet AMD without any kind of advance notice. If you convert to wet AMD, abnormal blood vessels grow under and into the retina in the macula, as you'll see here on the right side of the screen. These blood vessels can leak fluid, and they can sometimes bleed without any type of warning. You may not notice these changes until significant vision loss has occurred. If you convert to wet AMD, This significant vision loss can be rapid and severe. Symptoms of wet AMD include distortion, where straight lines look wavy. You can have dark spots in your vision, or just generalized blurry vision, as you see here on the screen. Unlike dry AMD, there are effective treatments for wet AMD, but these treatments are most effective when administered early on before symptoms are noticed and before vision loss has occurred. These treatments can halt or slow the progression of wet AMD, but they cannot restore vision that's already been lost. Once the wet disease starts, it will continue to advance until you receive treatment. Irreversible damage can occur within days to weeks and before symptoms are even noticed. But how early is early detection? Once symptoms of visual impairment are noticed, those wavy lines or dark spots appear in your vision, then the vision loss may have already occurred. The earlier you catch wet AMD, the better chance you have of preserving your vision, your independence, and the ability to go about your daily life participating in activities you enjoy. So, wet AMD treatments are most effective when the disease is caught early. Forsee Home is an early warning system for your eyes. You use this device at home in between your regular eye exams. It helps people with dry AMD detect wet AMD before you even notice that visual changes have occurred. But how does it work? Well, you take a simple daily test that checks for tiny changes in your vision. The test takes just a few minutes per eye per day. The data from each test is then sent to your eye doctor as well as the No-Tal Vision Diagnostic Clinic, the medical provider of Forsee Home. If a change in test scores is detected, the diagnostic clinic alerts your doctor. Your doctor's office will then contact you directly to schedule a follow-up visit. The Amsler grid, as you see here on the left side of the screen, was developed in the 1940s and has for a long time been recommended as a simple and accessible tool that you can use from home to monitor the changes in your vision. However, by the time you notice vision distortions on this Amsler grid, significant vision loss may have already occurred. Fortunately, new technology such as the Forseon Amd Monitoring Program has been developed so you can detect tiny changes before symptoms are noticed, and the system reports them to your doctor so you can receive immediate examination and treatment if necessary. Testing with Forsee Home is easy. You turn the device on and look into the viewfinder to begin testing. Then a bump will briefly appear and disappear, as you can see here in the center green circle on the screen. You'll use the mouse provided to click where the bump appeared and then return to this center dot. Data from each test is then sent to the No-Tal Vision Diagnostic Clinic for evaluation and provided to your eye doctor as well. Regular at-home monitoring is like brushing your teeth. It's just a good, healthy habit you do every day to help preserve your vision. Forsee Home allows you to take a proactive approach to protect your vision. A clinical partner will be with you every step of the way. After the No-Tal Vision Diagnostic Clinic receives a referral from your doctor, we'll answer any questions, verify coverage, and ship your device. Once you receive the device, the No-Tal Vision Diagnostic Clinic will walk you through setup and training. You and your doctor will continue to receive feedback from the No-Tal Vision Diagnostic Clinic. Our team will be sure to verify your insurance benefits and discuss with you prior to your acceptance of the device and prior to getting started with the program. There are low out-of-pocket costs for Medicare patients. So patients with Medicare and a secondary supplement plan could have out-of-pocket costs as low as $0 per month. Patients with Medicare and no secondary supplement plan will pay $15.06 per month once their yearly Medicare fee-for-service Part B deductible is met. Again, Forsee Home is FDA cleared and Medicare covered. Your doctor will send our No-Tal Vision Diagnostic Clinic the order for you to begin the Forsee Home AMD Monitoring Program. And appropriate candidates have a particular stage of dry AMD and a particular level of vision, which will be determined by your doctor. You'll continue to test regularly at home. If a change takes place, your doctor will be alerted and have you come in for an examination. In summary, the No-Tal Vision Diagnostic Clinic works with your doctor to remotely monitor your dry AMD, helping you retain functional vision throughout your AMD journey. I'm happy to answer any questions you might have. And thank you so much. Here's my contact information for your reference. I would love to hear from you. Well, I have just reviewed the clinical aspects of age-related macular degeneration and Foresee Home, but I would like to turn the attention now to our esteemed panelists. We have an all-star cast today with Foresee Home patients and Foresee Home referring physicians. One quick housekeeping item though, if you have questions for our panelists, please place them in the Q&A section. There's a button at the bottom of the webinar screen, and we'll be sure to answer those at the end of the program. First, I'd like to introduce Mr. Eric Larson, a patient whose conversion from dry to wet AMD was detected with Foresee Home. Welcome.
Good afternoon, Megan. Good to see you.
Likewise, good to see you. We would love to hear a little more about you and your journey with AMD and the success you had with Foresee Home. So thanks so much for joining.
Glad to do it.
Great. Well, first, maybe a little bit more about you, your background, profession, interests, and then of course your journey with AMD.
Sure. So my background is I'm actually an engineer by training, and I worked much of my career at IBM. I was an executive at IBM. I ran about a $500 million piece of IBM and enjoyed that tremendously. And I took early retirement from IBM because I started so young in the company. And since then, I've been in the entrepreneurial space, starting a number of businesses, selling some of them. And what I do most of the time is executive coaching. I love doing that, helping leaders be better leaders, helping teams be better teams. Mm-hmm. And so that's kind of what I do now in my work. You said my interest, I love the outdoors, hiking, camping, those kinds of things. I love movies and I love reading. I think those would probably be my top three things.
Great choices, and I enjoyed those things as well. And as far as your journey with AMD, when did that start? Where were you to begin with? Where are you now? What has transpired in between?
Right, good question. And I'm in a position where I can kind of talk about both sides of the equation. Mm-hmm. My journey with this started several years ago with my regular visit to my ophthalmologist. And at one point in my regular annual exam, he handed me this thing, the Amsler grid. I don't know if I can get it right. And so I started using that on a regular basis. As Megan already pointed out, some of the best 1940s technology out there. And so I used that very religiously, very carefully. My father had glaucoma, so I was sensitized towards taking care of your eyes. And so I used that on a regular basis. And then a couple of years later at my annual exam, he said, "How's that Amsler grid going?" And I said, "I'm starting to see dark areas and curvy lines and things like that." And so he gave me an additional test to look at my retina, at my macula. And he came back in with a very serious face. He says, "We need to talk. You've got something called CNV, choroidal neovascular, whatever." The fact is, I had converted over to wet AMD in my left eye. Mm-hmm. And he said, "The thing we need to do is get you to a retina specialist right away." And the next day I was in my retina specialist office. She did a great deal of very detailed tests, looking at the retina, looking at the macula, looking at the veins in the eye, all of that kind of thing. Very thorough, very professional. And she came back in and said, "Well, the bad news is that you've lost the central vision in your left eye." And I hadn't realized that. I didn't really believe her. She said, "Cover your right eye." And when I did that, I could see nothing in the central vision. It was just a gray blob. And one of the things I have found out in the interim is that your brain is very powerful, and it will go ahead and compensate for gaps in your visual field so that you think you're seeing everything when in fact there's a big miss there. Right. So I was at that point legally blind in my left eye. And so she did two things. She started me on treatments for that left eye to try to stop the bleeding that was actually happening in the eye at that point, and to make sure that it didn't go any further. So to preserve what was left, there's still some peripheral vision there, obviously. Mm-hmm. And then she started me on Foresee, the Foresee Home device for my good eye, for my right eye. And so she had me starting to use that to test on a regular basis. I like technology, I'm comfortable with it, so I was able to set it up very, very easily. In fact, it was very, very simple, I guess you could say. And yeah, I got it into my daily routine, and it would take, I would say, a minute, maybe less than a minute each day. I was only testing when I remember. And it was very simple to do. Like I said, doing it every day was very important. I actually took a business trip one time, and I got a call from the monitoring center, says, we haven't seen a report from you for a while. Well, because I'd been on a 5-day business trip. So they were very much alert as to what was going on. So the test was simple. I've talked to some people that said they don't want to have to bother with the test, and Megan alluded to this. These same people will brush their teeth every night. Maybe twice a day they'll brush their teeth. If you lose a tooth, they can fix that. If you lose an eye, they can't fix that. So why not invest a minute to preserve your vision? I do have one complaint about the Forseon machine, and I just say this jokingly. It is the world's most boring video game. So all you do is you find lines, you find bumps on the line, you point where the bump on the line is, done. And you do that several times. It shows you several lines. And then it, if you will, phones home and sends your data to the monitoring center, and they do that. But because I'm kind of a technical person, I actually found out you could log into the monitoring center and watch your eye progression, your test, and look at them. So you can either take this device and just use it and then put it away, or you can use it and be very involved in understanding where you are with your eye health. And what happened after about 2 years of using it, I got a call from my retina specialist, and they said, we want you to come in tomorrow. And because your right eye is starting to alert, to use the Forseon terminology, it's alerting, saying there's something going on with your eye. So I went in and they did a number of tests on that right eye, the same as they had done on the left. And I remember the moment when my retina specialist came in and she said, we got it. And basically, we caught this at the very earliest moment you can catch it. If you think about pixels on a screen, we caught it at the 1 pixel moment. So we really were able to get that. And so I've started the injections in each eye. And so I'm continuing with that. And for those of the in the audience who aren't familiar with it, the sound of getting injections in your eye sounds a whole lot worse than it is. I'm somebody that doesn't like eye drops, but I go in each month for my injections, and it's not that big a deal. So don't let that scare you off. The thought is worse than the action. So I'm continuing to receive that. I am legally blind in the left eye still, and I've got nearly perfect vision in my right eye. If there's not a better contrast to draw 0 to perfect, I don't know what other contrast you can draw. So that's my run through my story.
Well, I appreciate you sharing that. And you brought up so many great points. Thanks for telling us how you got started with Forseon. And I think that drastic comparison there, you summarized for us at the end, says it all as far as the news that you received and how you felt with the first eye compared to the news that you received and how you felt and likely what you knew was coming next for you as far as your treatment. Two very different experiences. Is that fair to say, how you felt with one versus the other?
Oh yeah, absolutely. One had, I'll use sort of a medical term, one had bad outcomes and one had good outcomes. And so the joke I tell people is I'm very careful now. I'm driving on my spare. So I want to make sure that I continue to take good care of that right eye. And so we're invested in that. And I could have lost that eye if it wasn't for the Forseon, because that didn't do the trick for us.
Absolutely. You mentioned the Amd grid, which, as I presented as well, and you correctly described, we've had that since the 1940s. It's a piece of paper versus a digital, a much more sensitive, much more specific type of detection system with Forseon. And I appreciate your analogy with you're brushing your teeth and losing a tooth, because of course I'd use that in my presentation as well. Do you have any tips or any words of wisdom as far as the best way to incorporate that into your daily routine? I always joke, I hope people are brushing their teeth every day, because that's what I'm using as an analogy or as a way to work it into the day. I've heard other patients tell me that while their coffee's brewing, they'll go take care of the test. But as far as just incorporating, you think it's just something that's important, you got to make it part of your daily routine?
Well, I mentioned I am an executive coach, and one of the things we do in that coaching world for professional coaching is we help people develop good habits, routines, it's called. And so I will tell you my example and then give a couple other examples. My example was I was actively working at that time, so I had a home office. So I would come into my home office after breakfast or whatever and sit down. Before I turned my computer on, I would turn on my 4C device and run through the test and then set it aside and then start my workday. So anything that would do that for you. I think if you're not working from home or you have a different routine or maybe you're retired or whatever it might be, instead of putting it in the home office, I would put it in the kitchen, in one of the kitchen cabinets. And then when you walk in, go ahead and get that first cup of coffee. But then before you make breakfast, before you do anything, before you return phone calls, just pull it out, take a test, and then put it away. If you don't have an automatic coffee maker, maybe set the coffee up to brew and then take the test and put it away. I would not advise doing it at the end of the day because other things come up, you forget about it. Do it first thing in the morning and get it taken care of. So inject it into your routine and find a way to do that. And it can be fun. I joke about it, it's not very exciting, but it's neat to be able to be actively involved in preserving your vision. You gotta keep your vision, man.
That's great advice as far as working it into your daily routine. And I appreciate you sharing the example of taking it out of the cabinet, just so that everyone's aware that it's very, very lightweight as far as being able to just set it up, plug it in. I describe it as a plug and play type of setup. So the fact that it's portable like that. You'd mentioned going out of town for a trip and how our No Television Diagnostic Clinic noticed that you hadn't tested in several days. And I think, to your point, that's such a wonderful thing to bring up as far as how our team is helping support this monitoring service. And we will give you a call to, first of all, make sure that you're okay, make sure the device is working as expected, and then see if there's anything we can do to help support you to get you back into testing. How has your experience been working with our No Television Diagnostic Clinic? Did you feel like you felt comfortable, you could pick up the phone anytime and call if you needed anything, if you had questions? How were we to work with in that regard?
Yeah, very great point. And I guess you'd call it the end user experience. It has been very positive. I don't know where you found all these nice people, but I have encountered only positive, kind people when I've interacted with the center. And they're very low key, willing to explain things, and also are able to explain complicated topics in pretty straightforward language. And so that's very useful. The other thing, it's kind of overarching, I guess you could say, and that is if you're looking at your healthcare, you see your doctor once a year, or you see your doctor when you're sick and something like that, or if something's going on, you might make an appointment. But with this, I felt like I had this cloud of angels hovering over me all the time, help making sure that I was okay every day. That's a really good feeling.
Well, that's wonderful to hear, and I'm very proud of my teammates. We, of course, we feel privileged to be able to help support patients who have age-related macular degeneration. And our team there at the No Television Diagnostic Clinic are ophthalmic professionals, so many of whom have worked in a practice, as far as someone maybe you've gone in to see when you're going to get your eye exam and they're testing your vision, or after the doctor's left the room, they're explaining the instructions for what you might need to do for your treatment or for your next visit. But yes, absolutely very caring, and of course want to do everything we can to support that earlier detection of a potential conversion from the dry to the wet kind of AMD. I think you also bring up a great point about this is not the most exciting test in the world to do. I've heard many descriptions about it, but as you said, just looking at a few moments of your day and just the impact that has on your vision and on your life, well worth the time. And yeah, and I think, like you said, working into your daily routine, so important. One of the last questions I have for you here is, you talked a little bit about this guardian angels, or this group of angels watching over you, which is so meaningful. Did Forseon make you feel that you're more empowered as far as taking charge of your disease, your condition? Did you feel safer? How did you feel just being able, like you said, to have someone caring for you between your regular exams?
Yeah, definitely. And again, it's important for anybody that happens to be listening to us. You can be as engaged with it or just participating in it. as far as how you use it. I decided to be very engaged. So after I did my test, I would log onto the website and see how I did, what my graphs looked like, and all that kind of thing. So I was very involved in that and saw things happening. People who aren't wired that way, that's fine. Just go take the test, click, 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 put it away, go get your coffee. I mean, it's pretty straightforward. So it was meaningful in that way, that I felt like I was in control. And I have reasons to be in control. I don't know if this will work or not, but yeah.
Oh, here it is.
That's my grandson.
Oh, so who's that sweet face? Yeah.
And I want to see him grow up. I want to be able to see him. I don't want him to forever be 4 years old. He's 8 years old now.
Right.
If I hadn't gotten my vision taken care of, he'd be forever 4 years old in my brain, because I wouldn't be able to see it. Now I get to see him grow up. As a matter of fact, just before this webinar, I took a break from my work. He's over at our house today, and he and I, listen to this carefully, this word carefully, he and I watched a movie together. We watched The Penguins of Madagascar, to be more specific, but we watched a movie together. You can't do that if you're blind. And so it means everything that it's there.
Absolutely. Very well said. Thank you so much. And is there anything that you would like to advise others who have age-related macular degeneration that you wish you had known?
I would get involved before there's trouble. So certainly, if you're already working with a retina specialist, I would encourage you to talk to her or him about the Forseon. I would suggest you talk to your ophthalmologist or optometrist about it. Because if you have those drusen, that beginning of dry, then you're a candidate for wet. And Megan mentioned this, but let me reiterate it. You can lose your vision in a matter of a couple of weeks. Mm-hmm. And so I would go to my ophthalmologist or optometrist and say, hey, since I've got dry, I want to go ahead and start doing this. And as you pointed out, depending on the insurance, it could cost you nothing. And where do you go back to get your eyes back? There's no window you can go to get your eyes back and say, I want another one.
Absolutely. The most precious gift, the gift of sight.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your journey and your thoughts, your suggestions, your experience. And we will see you just a little bit later for the question and answer session at the end of the program. So thank you so much.
All right, Megan, thank you so much. I appreciate the chance to participate today.
Oh, appreciate your joining. Thank you. And next, I would like to reintroduce Mr. Larry Hoffheimer, who is a current Forseon patient. Larry, hi, Larry.
I am.
Hi, always a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me. It's such a privilege to partner with the Macular Degeneration Association. No Television and I are so proud to be here. So thank you for the opportunity, and would love to hear a little bit more. You'd already shared some of your personal story, the history of your mom having wet AMD, but we would love to hear a little bit more about you personally and then your journey with age-related macular degeneration.
As I said, I got my start as a healthcare attorney in Washington, D.C. Mm-hmm. And it was only because of my mother's experience that I was in a position and interested in providing these seminars to people with macular degeneration, it being so prevalent, beyond what a lot of people think. Your chances of you have a first generation relative are 50%. If you do not have a first generation relative, it's 25%. We got 11 million people in this country with macular degeneration. Mm-hmm. And I think the first thing I would do, if I were giving some advice to people, which is I was lucky enough, as I said earlier, I had a retina specialist. I did not have dry macular degeneration. Mm-hmm. I did not have wet macular degeneration, but I had a retina specialist because I had diabetes. And I'm saying because of the prevalence of dry macular degeneration converting to wet, that you should have, I would recommend an annual exam by a retina specialist and an optometrist, but not because if it does change, as it did with me, mm-hmm. if you get in immediately, you have no vision loss. I had no vision loss. I still have 20/20 vision. I wanted to protect my good eye, and I continue to do that. Dr. Malley happens to be my retina specialist. He's painless. He's a pain, but he's painless. But and it's great care, and I don't mind doing it if it's important. But as far as the Forsee home, as I've said from the very beginning, this has got to be made available to more people.
Mm-hmm.
And I know it's a question of your resources and getting out there.
Right.
But I think the ophthalmology and the optometric community have to weigh in on this thing because it's only good. And as far as being a boring video game, yeah, it is pretty boring.
Well,
But yeah, I managed to do it usually between 5 and 7 times a week because it's very convenient. Unless I travel, in which case nobody calls me and balls me out. But that was interesting that Eric talked about going online and seeing your results. I didn't know how to do that. Maybe you can send me a tutorial on that because I'm kind of a technophile. Anyway, but
Absolutely. Would be happy to walk you through that. And you'd mentioned that working with our no television diagnostic clinic, as far as someone maybe giving you a call if you haven't tested in a while, because of the size of the device and because of the case, the soft case, you can take it with you. You can also let us know if something has come up where you won't be able to test for a little while. We can pause that on your account. So feel free to give us a call as far as any adjustments that might need to be made.
How about give me another device?
I'm sorry?
How about a second device? I got 2 homes.
Second device. We'd have to talk to our technical team about that. How about for now, we'll make sure it's portable for you. That's easy to take with you.
Anyway, it's been a great experience, and I know your colleagues. I've met them all, and I think it's a great company. I've worked with Forsee Home well before you ever got Medicare approval, and it was a great technology, and there's nothing like it on the market. No. And I call it, Amd good with steroids.
Well, we certainly agree with you as far as helping to spread the good word. So thank you for coordinating with us to do that. We are a small company, and slowly but surely, I think the news is getting out to my colleagues, my eye care professional colleagues. And I know you'd mentioned a few things that Mr. Larson spoke to as far as wonderful things to look forward to every day and why preserving your vision is so important. What does maintaining your functional vision mean to you and how you go about your daily life?
Well, I got 5 grandkids, and that means a lot to me.
Absolutely.
That's my legacy. I knew my mother couldn't see me towards the end. She could not see my face. And that's pretty sad.
Absolutely.
And, family, and I work every day, and I plan to work every day. And I don't think I could if my vision were there, because I have to drive, I have to travel, and that's what keeps me going.
Absolutely. That most valuable commodity, seeing the faces of the ones we love and being able to spend time with them. Absolutely. And you'd mentioned a little bit about how you got started with Forsee Home with Wet AMD in one eye, but of course you're still using it to protect your fellow eye or the other eye,
right.
As Mr. Larson said, the spare, if you will. So as far as questions that I usually get about Forsee Home candidates and would I qualify for this? As I mentioned in the presentation, of course, you'd have to have a certain stage of dry AMD and you'd have to have a particular level of vision. So once you get to that wet kind, you're not able to use Forsee Home anymore. But at that point, you'll start receiving injections. And I think that our physicians are going to be talking a little bit more about that later.
You think Eric sold his on eBay?
Do I think what?
Eric sold his on eBay.
Well, I don't believe so because, and thank you for bringing it up, we have a system in place that once we have received notification that we've caught that detection from dry to wet AMD with Foresee Home, we will coordinate arrangements just like we coordinate with you and receive your approval before shipping you the device. We'll make sure that we get that device back from you as well. So we are definitely keeping tabs on that. As far as working with our no television diagnostic clinic, how has that been with calling us and talking to those technicians, those ophthalmic professionals, and those caring people that we had mentioned before? Do you feel comfortable that if you needed something, you could call me, you could call into the
Well, because I know you and I know your boss, I could call either one of you, but
for sure.
I don't need to. I mean, it's the old story. No news is good news.
That's right. That's right. No news is good news. We will absolutely, with the system in place and the monitoring service, we will notify your physician if there's been
Well,
any change in the test score. But like you'd said, if you would like to become more involved with looking at your testing regularly, we can certainly go through how to do that. Another thing we do is we like to send out patient newsletters so that you have information about what's going on with the company, maybe another success story with Foresee Home, some testing tips. But definitely we like to keep in touch with you as well with your monthly reporting and regular newsletters. Last question for you, Larry. Is there anything you'd like to advise others with AMD that you wish you had known?
just that I think you should have a retina specialist standing by, even if it's once a year visitation, because if there is a change, time is of the essence. It's as simple as that. And that's what saved me.
Absolutely. Well stated. This is a chronic condition. It goes on for a long time, but if that change takes place, it's very sudden. And we want you to have the best chance at that earlier detection. So thanks so much, Larry. And we will see you a little bit later as well during the question answer session. So
Great.
appreciate you sharing your story and thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Okay. See you in a bit. Joining us next will be Dr. Jeffrey Gerson. He is an optometrist and a Foresee Home referring physician partner. So, hi, Dr. Gerson. Welcome.
Hey, thanks, Megan. Thanks for having me.
Great to see you. Well, before I get into some questions for you, we would love to know a little bit more about you, where you practice, and just a little bit of your background, if you'd be so kind.
Sure. So I'm an optometrist in Kansas City. I work in a practice where there's both optometrists and ophthalmologists. And we see really all kinds of patients. And as it turns out, when you see all kinds of patients, you end up seeing a lot of people with macular degeneration. So over the years, it's become a bigger and bigger part of what I do.
Wonderful. Well, thanks so much for joining. And I know that you are, of course, an avid supporter of Foresee Home and of No Television, and of course on the medical board for the Macular Degeneration Association. So thank you so much for being on the front lines and all you do for our AMD patients. So would love to know a little bit more about why you have your patients monitor their AMD at home in addition to your in-office screenings, because of course you're seeing these patients regularly and you want to know that those, especially those at risk of converting to wet AMD, what's going on, between in order to catch her.
Yeah. So I guess at first I just want to mention, I know Larry kind of mentioned this too, as far as how long he's been working with no television. And I know you mentioned in your talk about Foresee Home being covered by insurance, but I've been using it with patients since well before that was even the case. So probably for 10, 12 years, I've had patients using the device. And so for 10, 12 years, it's been a great experience for me and more importantly for my patients. And it's just something that for me, I have a hard time with patients that would qualify for using it. I have a hard time not using it. For me, I almost can't find an excuse why I wouldn't prescribe this to my patients. And really for all the reasons that Larry and Eric pointed out and how easy it is to use, the follow-up from no television. And for me, it's, the people that are on this are people that are at higher risk of going from the dry kind to the wet kind. So they're people that I would worry more about. But when they're using Foresee Home, I know that I really don't need to worry. And more importantly, I can tell them that they don't need to worry. That as long as you're doing your testing on a regular basis, you can leave the rest to me and to No Tol diagnostic clinics, and you'll be really well taken care of.
That's great. A safety net, if you will, between your regular office exams. And how does that make your patients feel when you explain that to them, as far as having that backup plan in place?
Yeah, they like it because, nobody wants to go to a doctor any more often than they need to. And so this is a way that oftentimes people say, well, can I come in every 6 months instead of every 3 or 4 months? Or that, people always want to stretch it out, which is human nature. And if they're doing Forseon home, then I feel comfortable with that we can allow longer time in between visits because of the safety net. The other thing, when you say, how do patients feel about it? I don't know that I've ever had a patient that I told about Forseon home and what it does and why I want them to use it. I don't think I've ever had a patient say, no, thanks, that doesn't sound like a good idea. Universally, people think it sounds like a good idea. And, Eric held up his Amsler grid, and yeah, people universally think, well, something that's a little bit better technology and is going to be more accurate sounds way better.
Absolutely. Thank you for the feedback. And as far as that process, so you've got the patient there and you've recommended Foresee home. And then of course, we like to say that at No Television, at our No Television Diagnostic Clinic, that we do the heavy lifting. So you, as a referring physician partner, can feel good that your patients are in great hands and that we'll take it from there, literally. What happens when you actually have an alert, or if someone receives a change in their signal and you are notified about that? What happens there, and what do you do for the patient when they come in?
Yeah, so the follow-up from Notal is actually pretty impressive. So I'll get an email that's sent in an encrypted form. So basically very, very safe email communication, telling me that a patient of mine has basically triggered an alert, meaning they've had a change in their testing pattern. And so then we immediately call the patient, usually that day, and try to get them into the office within the next 2 or 3 days. And then, they happily come in because they know they're doing the test for a reason. And so they're pretty happy, maybe a little nervous, but happy to come in case there's something going on that's caught early. The other part about it, as far as my interaction with Notal, that's really impressive, and I think patients can feel a lot of comfort in this, is usually within about a week of me receiving that automated generated email, I get a personal email from someone at Notal saying, have you called such and such patient? Have they been into your office? Have they been taken care of? So not only do I get the initial email about an alert, I get a follow-up email about a week later, making sure that we've gotten that patient in and taken care of. So really, it makes it so it's very difficult for someone to fall through the cracks.
Wonderful. And I'm very happy to hear that. Like I said, we're very proud that we want to be an extension of your office and that we want to take the same great care of your patients as you do. And as far as patients coming in for those exams when they've had an alert, sometimes they'll come in and there's not been a conversion, but maybe there's been a shift in their disease. As we've mentioned, it's a chronic progressive condition. It's very dynamic. It's not stagnant. So how do patients feel when they come in for those type of exams? And then if the patient has converted to wet AMD, what happens from there, and how do you send the patient for proper referral treatment, or what are next steps?
Sure. So luckily, and kind of in defiance of odds, I have not had someone come in that actually had converted, which kind of defies the odds. But I've had just a few that were what we would call false positive, meaning they had an alert, they came in, everything was okay. As it turned out, though, I ended up sending those patients on to a retina specialist. And the reason was, is I told them, look, everything appears to be fine right now, but why don't we send you to the retina specialist so you can meet them and you can develop or start a relationship so that if in the future you do need treatment, you'll already know the person. It'll be a little bit more comfortable of an experience. Because like Eric mentioned, the idea of getting an injection into your eye is terrible. But for most people, it's fairly simple to have done, and it's painless. And so I figure if I can have you meet that person first before they need to do that type of treatment, maybe it'll be a more comfortable experience. So, and I've talked to the patients afterward, and they felt good about the experience and meeting that person. So if they need them in the future.
I think that's a wonderful idea to have that framework set up in advance, and so that everyone involved for coordinated care is kept in the loop and everyone feels comfortable, and your patients know that you're doing absolutely everything in your power to to help protect and preserve their vision. So
Right.
absolutely,
Right.
absolutely. Is there anything else important that you would like to share that we haven't covered, either from your perspective, working with patients, or maybe working with no television?
Yeah, I think two things. One, as far as no television, I can't say how impressed I've been with the customer service or patient service. An example would be, I had a patient not too long ago that had some issues, and I know I spoke to you about this patient, that no television went way above and beyond as far as taking care of this person and making sure that all their needs were met. So I think that's really important to point out. That's one. And two, I think what I would encourage anyone that's listening in today is ask your doctor about this. Just because they haven't talked to you about it doesn't mean you don't qualify. There's so many doctors, whether it's optometrists or ophthalmologists or even retina specialists, that just aren't aware that this is available. And so sometimes it's okay. And sometimes it's important for patients to be their own advocates and ask, hey, I heard about this at-home monitoring system. It's called Forseon. Would I qualify for this? Because I truly believe that anybody that would qualify for this needs to be using this.
Well, thank you for the feedback about our no television diagnostic clinic. And I'm so glad you've had a great experience. And I think it's wonderful advice for patients to feel empowered and take charge of their condition and ask those questions, and find eye care professionals that are going to build that framework that you talked about, where they're going to coordinate your care and help just do the very best for you. So, well, thank you so much, Dr. Gerson. We will
Sure thing.
do a little bit for question and answer as well. So thanks for your
All
time.
right. You're welcome.
Perfect. And last but certainly not least, Dr. Joshua Malley is a retinal specialist and also a Forseon referring physician partner. Hi, Dr. Malley.
Hi, Megan. How are you doing?
Good, thank you. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Of course. And as far as a little bit about you, we would love to learn more as far as your practice, and then, of course, working with the Macular Degeneration Association, and anything else you'd like to share.
Sure. My name is Dr. Joshua Malley. I'm a board certified ophthalmologist and fellowship trained retina specialist. I'm practicing in Sarasota, Florida. I'm the retina medical director of the Macular Degeneration Association, as well as the founder and CEO of Malley Enterprises. And it's just a pleasure to be here today, and I hope happy to share my experiences with Forseon.
Wonderful. Well, we're so happy to have you. Thanks so much. And as far as your patients, when you are talking to those who may be good candidates for Forseon, why do you refer them, or what's your motivation, and what does that conversation sound like?
Yeah, I mean, two things for me in clinical practice. I think number one is providing the best care for my patients and providing them with the sort of that reassurance that they're always being monitored, just like what Dr. Gerson was mentioning. I think that's a very important point. Again, it's all about customer service, it's all about the patient and patient-centric care. So I think Forseon really represents that, as a tool that we can use, in eye care to help give patients the best possible chance of a good outcome. And so that's the second thing, big thing, is that I want my patients to have good outcomes. I think that's important. It's a reflection of my skills as a retina specialist, as well as, how I take care of patients. So certainly I want to give them the best opportunity to achieve that great outcome. And the way we do that, especially with a condition like AMD, is by finding, conditions like Wet Amd as fast as possible, find that conversion as quick as possible, because we know that when we catch Wet Amd, it's early, and we treat it earlier, we always get a better outcome. And I rarely say that in medicine. I rarely say always, but really with this kind of condition, if you catch it earlier at an earlier stage, you always get a better outcome. It's always better for the patient. So certainly, I think that provides the two major things is better clinical outcomes and patient sort of satisfaction and reassurance.
Absolutely. Great points. Of course, totally agree. And as the retinal specialist on the panel, of course, you're seeing patients a lot of times when they have converted from the dry to the wet kind of AMD. Of course, you're referring patients who have that wet AMD in one eye and would benefit from Forseon in the other eye to protect that fellow eye. And I believe you've had some catch cases, as we like to call them, when Forseon is doing its job and is detecting that conversion from dry to wet AMD earlier. What did your patients' testing look like, or what did you find on their exam before versus after their alert, and how did you go about explaining that to the patient, and what did you do from there essentially?
Sure. So my most recent catch case was a few months ago. It was a patient that came to me. I originally saw her back in 2017, and when I first saw her, I immediately put her on Forseon. I said, you're a great candidate. I mean, it's kind of what I would call a slam dunk sort of Forseon. She had, had great vision still. She had intermediate or kind of what we call moderate AMD. So she met all the criteria, for getting the device. And she's just that, very active, person that really needs her vision and needs to do those daily activities on her own. And so her vision is very important to her, obviously. So just, classic Forseon patient that I recommend using it for. And so she was using the device since 2017. I think it was August 2017. And actually just this year, she, I said towards the end of last year, she actually got an alert in her right eye. I believe she got 2 alerts, and one in like kind of November and then one in December, I believe, for her right eye. But there's nothing there on exam. It was what I would call a non-CNV alert, which happens. We always say about from the clinical trial looking at Forseon, about once every 4 years, you can get these kind of what we call non-CNV alerts. So it was not unusual. And any good screening test is going to have these kind of alerts. So it's just it comes with the test is how I phrase it with patients. But she, she's kind of like, well, is this really working? Is this overcalling things? She was starting to doubt the test at that point. And I said, no, you gotta trust the test. We'll keep an eye on you. I'll see you back, in a couple months, and we'll just kind of go from there. She actually, it alerted one more time in February of this year. And she came in though. She came in. I was very happy that she came in because when she presented, she actually had the early conversion to wet AMD. She had a little bit of bleeding in her retina, which is a sign of wet AMD. And all the testing, OCT, fluorescein angiography, all those testings that we do in the office, all confirmed it. It was very, very subtle, very, very early. But you can see that, it caught it so early. Her vision, when I initially, had put her on the device, it was 20/30 in that right eye. And so she presented, in February 2021, this year, still with that 20/30 vision. And so we were able to catch her right at the perfect moment. And I was able to treat her with eye injections and really regress the disease very quickly. So, a couple of things on this case that were interesting were that, she was, like I said, she was doubting the test. She started to doubt the test and saying, is this actually, finding it? But you can see how, she got a lot more reassurance when we found this out. She was so relieved. She was so happy that she trusted the test. She trusted Forseon. And trusted me too, by the way. So it really helped, my reputation, credibility, because again, I trust the technology, I trust the test, and that's the reason why I put my patients on it. And even when you have these sort of what we call non-CNV alerts, I still stick with the test because that's what the data says to do. And you can see in this case, it was a sight saving for her to have that trust. So I think it really establishes the trust we should have in our testing. The second thing that was interesting, and I actually saw this patient just last week, so I can actually give you an update. So her vision in that right eye is now 20/20. It is 20/20, if you can believe that. The second thing is we've been able, from February until now, we've been able to treat her so much easier. So usually what I do with patients is we start out with monthly injections, and sometimes it takes a little while to get the disease under control, because sometimes we catch it at a later stage. But for her, it's caught so early, the treatment was much more effective, as I was talking about before, with getting a better outcome with earlier treatment. So the treatment worked much better. And so now I've been able to extend her on injections to, now she's at 10 weeks of shots. Usually, again, you start with once a month, but now she's already at 10 weeks, just a few months into her treatment. So really, really impressive results. And it's really all thanks to Forseon.
What an outstanding story. I'm sure you could see me smiling as you were telling me the outcome and how great her vision is. And of course, that's why we do what we do, right? It's just everything for the patients and for them to protect their vision and have better vision. And you brought up a good point about Foresee Home and those false positives or the non-CNV alerts. And I think the very real aspect of your patient thinking, is this thing working? Should I keep testing? And it is, it's a metamorphopsia detector. So it's going to just pick up on tiny little distortions or changes as the disease changes. And so I'm so glad to hear how well she's doing after that earlier detection, and then her course of treatments now, which I was going to ask you to maybe describe a little bit more in detail to us about injections. We've heard a lot of comments about that today. And so since you are the one who is administering these, would be great to hear a little bit more about what that process is and how you make sure your patients are comfortable and how often they might need these injections.
Sure. Yeah. So whenever we talk about injections, it's always kind of a scary thought. I always tell patients that, it's really worse than it sounds. We all have these images of in our mind about what injections are. I would say throughout the years, I think patients are more and more comfortable with the idea. I mean, they have friends or family members that get injections, so it's a little bit less scary, when I mention it. But I always tell patients, a couple things, standardly is that first of all, I started out with once a month shots initially, and that's to get the disease under control. Mm-hmm. Once the disease is under control and inactive, and we get everything to stop, the bleeding to stop, and everything is inactive, then we can start to stretch out the shots a little bit. So this is called a treat and extend protocol. And I think probably most retina specialists in the country use this protocol. Mm-hmm. So we stretch out the shots usually by 1 to 2 weeks each visit. And assuming that the disease is still inactive, we just stretch out the shots further and further each time. And, there's times when, the disease can come back and become active again. We have to kind of adjust those intervals and so forth. Sometimes even use different medications at that point. But generally speaking, we try to, use that treat and extend protocol and extend the shots out until we get to about the 12 to 16 week mark. At that point, that's pretty far out. And at that point, I either keep patients on a maintenance dose every 12 weeks or so, or I offer them to be only treated if they really need it. So they come in a little bit more frequently to be examined, and if there's any disease activity, we treat them at that time. So there's two different strategies. I don't think there's a right or wrong answer there. It's just the preferences, because the data shows they're about the same at that point. So it's really up to the patient and the doctor's decision at that point. But I think that seems to be the best strategy, is that treat and extend protocol to, give the patients the maximum treatment while minimizing the number of injections you have to do. That gets usually the best outcome. So in regards to my process, I numb the eye very well with a numbing injection first, and then I use a clean solution to clean the eye with, and the injection takes 2 seconds to do. And then, we wash out the eye, make sure to get out all the, what we call the Badine solution that is what helps clean the eye. And that's pretty much it. I mean, Larry certainly can speak to that, but I think that it's a pretty streamlined process. At this point, we do a lot of injections on a daily basis in the clinic, but we try to make sure that every patient is comfortable. We make sure that they, whatever they need, and make sure they're very comfortable during the injection. That's really important because you want them to have a good experience. So I think we've got the process pretty well. So that's how we do it.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. And it sounds like there's this good communication, of course, is very important as far as working with your retina specialist and coordinating how many appointments you're going to have and what to expect at each appointment, and just keeping patients updated with how they're progressing and what's needed next. And so thanks for sharing a little bit about the process itself. Yes, I'm sure that Larry and Eric can both chime in as far as what that injection experience is like. Before we go to the questions and answers with the entire panel, is there anything else important from your perspective that you'd like to share with us or you'd like us to know?
Yeah, I'd certainly just say the one caveat I would say to everything I just said is that really every patient is different. I mean, that we treat everybody on an individualized patient basis. So certainly what I've said is kind of a general guideline, but every patient is different. Some patients need a little bit more treatment. Some people need less treatment, and so forth. So I think just keeping in mind that, everybody's case is different, and and retina specialists do things differently. So it's just really, these are just general guidelines to consider, but realize that your particular case may not be the same. So it's just, you want to make sure that your doctor is on board on providing individualized care for you.
Great. And thank you as well. Just I thank Dr. Gerson, same to you. Appreciate you being right there on the front lines, and your passion for patients is evident. So thanks for all that you do.
Thank you.
Great. And now we'll ask the panelists to come back. Let's see you on video if you'd be so kind. And we've got some great questions, looks like. We will try to get to all of these and make sure we address each one. The first question says, from what you've described, I think this is a program that I'd like to be on. My doctor doesn't seem to know about this. How can I find a doctor that would be able to prescribe this program for me? So as we mentioned, we're a small company, and we are trying to get the good word out about Forseon Home. You can certainly go to our website for more information. You can go to macularhope.org, the Macular Degeneration Association website. But I think, as our panelists have said, I think the most important thing is first talk to your doctor about this and have that conversation about whether or not you'd be a good candidate. Have you refer us to the program. There's a question for Eric. Let's see. Sorry, I may have missed your explanation about how you noticed that you had a vision problem. Please explain how you noticed the change.
Yeah, and great question. And that's really very important for everybody on this session to understand. There are no symptoms. You don't feel anything. It doesn't hurt. You don't realize you're not seeing something because, like I said before, your brain makes up for the pieces of your vision that are missing by filling it in with the other eye. You will have no sensation whatsoever. The only way to test or to discover that you have this is to work with your optometrist, your ophthalmologist, your retina specialist, and they can do in-office examinations that will be able to detect this with OCT, with fundus machines and things like that, take high resolution images, or the OCT machine. But I'm telling you, there is no sense. I'm really passionate about this. It cost me an eye to be smart enough to understand this stuff. And I really want people to understand that you can't take this for granted. And so there are no sensations at all. There's no way for you to discover it on your own. You need to partner with your doctor. I will tell you, having heard what I heard today, if I was in Kansas City, I'd be looking up Dr. Gerson's phone number. And if I was in Sarasota and needed a retina specialist, I'd talk to Dr. Malley's office, because these guys are engaged in helping their people preserve their vision. And let me go off on just a short tangent if I can. Nobody is going to force you to take shots in your eyes. Nobody's going to give you shots you don't need. Nobody's going to do over treatment or anything like that. It's going to be because there is a need there. And again, as Dr. Malley talked about, there are steps that they take. So it literally is painless. It is absolutely painless. And I go in every 4 weeks. I've got one of those aggressive cases. My doctor does the treat and extend policy. We went to 5 weeks. My bad eye started bleeding again. So I'm on an every 4 week kind of regimen. And I actually don't mind it anymore. It's kind of like on my calendar, I have the next year planned out and just do it. But if you have any trepidation about doing this because it might discover you need injections in your eyes, I would ask you to do this. If you wear glasses, take out some Post-it notes, stick them on the fronts of your glasses, and walk around the rest of the day without that central vision. And I think you'll have your mind made up at that point.
Absolutely worth it to protect your sight, right? Yeah, for sure. Thank you. And Larry, I think a similar question to you. It says, Mr. Hoffheimer, how did you notice that you lost vision?
Well, I was sitting at my office desk and I noticed my door jamb was jagged. Having worked with the Macular Degeneration colleagues, I knew immediately what that was. Like I said earlier, I had a retina specialist, not for my macula though. I called my retina specialist. I went the next day, had my first injection, and it saved my vision to 2020. But the timing was everything. I mean, I went immediately, so there was no chance for it to get worse. Now I'm going, I don't know, Dr. Malley is juggles it around. Now I'm going every 8 weeks or maybe 10 weeks,
Mhm.
and apparently I'm doing okay. So, but I do the 4C home to protect that eye that's hasn't bleeding yet. Thanks to
That's
you, Josh.
that's right. You're absolutely in wonderful hands. Um, The next question is about, do I need an internet connection to use 4C Home? We actually will, our team will ask you that before we ship you the device. We'll make sure that you either need a Wi-Fi connection or a cellular modem, whatever's most appropriate for your area, but we'll have that figured out and we'll have the device equipped with that before we send it to you. And then one more technical question for 4C Home. It is, I just started with the program. I'm slightly confused about which bumps or which direction to signal on. If you would be so kind to call in to our No Television Diagnostic Clinic, we'll have one of our technicians, one of our ophthalmic professionals go through some of the testing tips with you to make sure that you're comfortable and you're clicking where you need to and you're doing what you need to do to be successful with the test. So please feel free to give us a call at any time. The next question is, what patients will most benefit from 4C Home? All patients with dry AMD. Dr. Gerson, perhaps you can answer for us when you're looking at patients who have dry AMD, at what stage or who makes a good candidate for 4C Home?
Yeah, so technically the people that I guess we would say qualify are people that have what's called intermediate dry macular degeneration. So if you've done a little bit of research, then you might recognize the term drusen. So anyone that has any large drusen or any pigmentary changes are the people that qualify. And so, like I said, I'm pretty aggressive with any of those people, trying to get them to start using 4C Home.
Great, thank you. Like we said, that appropriate level of vision, appropriate stage of dry AMD. So thank you. The next question is about looking at the No Television website. I see there's a home OCT on the way. Should I wait for this to come out? So OCT is that scan that you've had done, I'm sure, in the office when your doctor is looking at your examination and the images of your stage of AMD. And so we are working on currently, we No Television are working on a version of that to use at home. And the idea would be that it's the same platform as 4C Home, in the sense that we have our No Television Diagnostic Clinic working with you. You'd have to have an appropriate stage or type of AMD, which would be Wet AMD. Of course, this is all investigational at this point in time. It is not yet FDA approved. We are seeking FDA approval and currently in US clinical trials. But if you'd like more information, please visit our website. We have press releases and lots of information there for you to be able to see just what's happening with this exciting new technology that's being developed. But in the meantime, of course, since that would be for wet AMD, it's very important to monitor your dry AMD with the currently approved product with 4C Home. The next question about deductibles, I will just go ahead and state that I am certainly not the financial or insurance expert from the No Television team. We absolutely have patient financial services team who would be able to research your insurance information, any potential payments that you might have, look at your deductibles, your particular plan before you ever make any commitment and before we would ever ship you the device. But we absolutely will work with you. We will work with your insurance. We want to make sure that if you're a good candidate clinically or medically and you are wanting to be on this program, we will definitely work with you from a patient financial services standpoint to make that happen. So as soon as we receive your information about your insurance from your physician, from your referring physician, then we'll be sure to look into that, research it, give you the information, and then go from there.
If you have regular Medicare and you happen to also purchase the supplemental, out-of-pocket cost is zero. Now, some people don't do that because the supplemental they figure is too expensive, or they have Medicare Advantage. In those cases, you'll have a small copay.
Larry, what I'll tell you is that when my patients come back in after they've started, I oftentimes ask them how much it costs them. And to your point, the vast majority of my patients don't pay anything, the vast majority. And the most, if someone has Medicare, the most they're going to pay as far as the 20%, if Medicare pays 80 and they pay 20%, is about $14.
That's right.
Yep.
It's a
Yes.
bargain.
Yeah, thank you both.
It's a bargain.
The bargain. Especially when we're talking about your your most precious gift of sight, right?
Right.
For sure.
Dr. Malley, there is a question here about how you qualify your patients for the program. Of course, we've talked a little bit about the stage of AMD and of course the level of vision, but is there anything else you ask patients or anything that goes into that conversation we were talking about referring them to the program?
Sure. Yeah, I think, you mentioned the two, qualifying things, but, one thing to consider, it is a device. It is a machine with a mouse. I used to, in the beginning, when I was first prescribing it, I was kind of more concerned about how the patient was going to navigate that, if they didn't know how to use technology, or if they had some physical limitation, they couldn't actually do the test physically. I've sort of laxed that because I've realized that patients can still do the test. Okay, so I mean, really, if they have severe like tremor or something, it might be difficult. But in regards to the actual computer technology part, I mean, Notal is so good at training these patients with their call center and with the logistical systems they have in place, that that's not really a concern for me anymore. So I don't restrict that based on, even if they say, I don't know how to use a computer, I don't know how to use any sort of technology, I don't use that as a limitation anymore, because I've realized over the years that Notal has done a great job of training patients, no matter what skill level with technology. So, but I think that there are, like I said, a few physical factors, like that. And then another thing to consider is that, occasionally, and they saw this in the clinical trial too, that some patients, because of their retinal anatomy, for whatever reason, they can't what we call baseline, which means that despite them trying to do some tests to establish a baseline algorithm for their particular condition, they just can't do it. And it happens, I think less than 20% of patients, but it is something to keep in mind that just some patients, because the retinal anatomy aren't candidates, but like I said, the vast majority of patients are, and I think should be taking advantage of that.
Excellent points. And I'm glad you bring that up as far as those who may be a little bit hesitant as far as the technology or utilizing technology. So we would often explain to patients that if they can use a mouse, like on a desktop computer, just click with their index finger, then certainly they would be able to perform the Forseon test. You're right that a certain percentage of patients for various reasons can't establish that baseline or that starting point where the device is learning about the patient is learning how to use the device. And for those who have questions about being able to use the mouse or use Forseon if you have tremor or if you have any kind of arthritis or difficulty with your hands, we would certainly have you try to test with Forseon. And just like there's no obligation to accept the service to begin with, there's no obligation to continue with it. So if you find that you try to do it and you're not able to, we will certainly coordinate the shipping to have you return the device to us. So no obligation, and feel comfortable that we want you to give it your best shot. And if it doesn't work out, then we'll certainly still continue to take care of you in that regard. We had mentioned there are some questions about special doctors that you might need to see to get this program. So any eye care professional, so optometrists, ophthalmologists, retina specialists are able to prescribe or refer good candidates for the Forseon AMD monitoring program. And there are some great questions here as well about other conditions that patients might have in addition to age-related macular degeneration, and can you use Forseon? So perhaps Dr. Gerson, if you'd be so kind to let us know how you would approach Forseon for a patient who maybe has diabetes as well as AMD, or maybe has glaucoma as well as AMD. Can they still use Forseon, or what does that conversation sound like?
Yeah, absolutely. For me, the other conditions, if anything, make it even more important, because the more issues that you have, the more ways you could potentially lose vision, makes it even that much more important to protect you from all the ways that we can. So yeah, absolutely. For me, really the only thing that matters is if you fit into the category of someone that would qualify for using this. To me, it's essentially irrelevant what other eye conditions you have. This is something I want you to do.
Perfect. Thank you. A question about Forseon being available outside of the United States. At this point in time, it's only available in the US. Thank you so much for your question and for your interest. And for Dr. Malley, perhaps there's a question or a statement here. I don't know if this was discussed or not, but does Forseon take the place of eye injections? I take an injection every 5 weeks at present. Macular degeneration and the wet kind came on within a week. Thanks to a knowledgeable optometrist, I saw a retina specialist the same afternoon. Well, outstanding about that early catch. And perhaps Dr. Malley, you can talk to us about having wet AMD, receiving injections and no longer needing Forseon home versus protecting that good eye, that fellow eye.
Yeah, sure. So to be clear, Forseon is a diagnostic screening test, whereas eye injections are a treatment. So two different things. And as Megan mentioned, once you become wet, so once you convert to the wet form, the Forseon device is not designed to monitor a wet AMD patient, at least not yet. But right now the indication is for patients with dry AMD. So once they either become wet or they've been wet before, the test is not for them. But we do continue to test patients with the dry form of AMD. So let's say one eye is wet, receiving injections. The other eye, if it's dry and it meets the requirements for the Forseon, then I definitely highly recommend the Forseon test for the patient with that eye for the dry part. So certainly I think it's important to be monitoring that dry even more closely. And it has even more value there because, as you know, and the patients will know that, that their dry eye is probably the better seeing eye. And it's so important to maintain that one and find that one as soon as possible when it converts to wet, if it ever does in their lifetime. So even more reason to use the Forseon device.
Absolutely. And as you'd mentioned just now, and then in your previous comments about catching it earlier and how patients do better with treatments, and as far as their treatment regimen being much improved with earlier detection, there's a question here about treatment in one eye and do they need Forseon home in the other eye, which I think we have addressed as far as absolutely we need to, because there's a higher chance of conversion in that other eye to wet AMD, absolutely need to protect it with Forseon home. And perhaps Dr. Malley or Dr. Gerson, there's a question about how long patients typically have dry AMD before they transition to wet. So as I had mentioned in my brief presentation, this is a chronic condition. Dr. Malley, you had a patient, I think the case you presented, you said the patient came to you and started monitoring with Forseon home around 2017 and just had these alerts in maybe 2020 or 2021. So this is definitely kind of the marathon, not a sprint in most cases. Would you agree with that, Dr. Gerson?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the real answer to that is how long does it take? You never know. And so I think since you never know, you need to be prepared for it to be tomorrow and monitoring closely enough so that if it is tomorrow, that you catch it. And if it takes a year or 5 or never happens, then that's even better. But you won't know soon enough unless you're monitoring the right way.
Is Notal Vision working with any of the professional societies, optometric or retina, to try to get them to support this testing? And what's the status of that?
We are, absolutely. We think I thank you for bringing that up. We think that's very important. And we're very proud to support the optometric and ophthalmology and retina specific societies. So we regularly support those organizations. We attend the national meetings that take place, the annual conferences that take place. And we will continue to do that because like we said, we need to get the good word out about Forseon home. And the last question here is, how do you know you've converted to wet AMD from dry if you don't have the machine? Well, as we've learned on during the conversation, the discussion today, that absolutely Forseon home, when you add that to what your doctor is recommending as far as your regular examinations and testing, and then letting your doctor know if you've had any changes, it's going to give you the best chance at detecting that conversion from dry to wet much earlier. So absolutely, we want to give you the best chance possible. Any closing comments from the panel here?
No, that's yeah, I'll close. I think it's.
And I got a comment too. So.
Okay, great.
What's that? Go ahead, Eric.
Okay, I saw in the chat questions about my doctor doesn't know about this and what should I do? And to the doctor's benefit, they will see, and a retina specialist may see 40 patients a day. And that could, ultimately be, 80 eyes they look at during the day. You get 2 eyes that have to last you 80 years plus. So you've got to be the one with the focus. I would educate, and I'm going to say something real direct, and I hope I don't offend anybody. I would educate my optometrist or my retina specialist about this. If they are uncooperative, I'd be looking for a different doctor. The 3 doctors here have been focused on this and doing this. And I believe you need 3 things to have a good relationship with your doctor. Your doctor needs to have 3 things. They need to be skilled at what they do. They need to be smart. In other words, they can understand complicated things and explain complicated things to you. And the one a lot of people miss is heart. They have to have the heart. They have to care about you as a person. All 3 of the doctors on this panel are of an age where they went through something in medical school that was probably called something like patient-centered medicine, where you look at the whole patient, you care about their feelings as well as just dealing with whatever's going on. So find people that can do all 3 of those pieces, but don't lose your vision when you don't have to, would be the last thing I'd say.
As a practical matter, that's why I suggested working with the professional societies where they build that into their criteria. Because if you don't have that, doctors are not accustomed to taking medical advice from their patients. I've represented doctors for 40 years. I know better. They are not interested in a patient's view. That's why they don't like pharmaceutical advertisements on television. So I think it's got to be, you got to work this whole issue through the professional societies, because they're the ones that doctors are going to follow. What do you think about that, Jeff and Josh?
Go ahead, Josh.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly agree. I think it's important to establish things that are going to help patients, and having those tools available and getting the word out, and making sure they have the support of all our societies. And because, again, it's all about the patients. It's all about focusing on getting the best outcomes, and I think that helps to give our profession a good reputation, as well as gives patients the best possible outcomes so they can live their lives. Absolutely.
Yeah, I agree.
Absolutely. And thank you for your kind comments, Eric. And like I said, I'm honored to be in the company of these wonderful folks. And thank you, Larry, for the time today. As I mentioned, it is such a privilege to partner with the Macular Degeneration Association. I hope everyone enjoyed the presentation and maybe took away a little bit of new information that will be helpful for them in their AMD journey. And we at No Television are here for you. We are very proud of what we do and happy to help you in any way. So thanks so much, Larry.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Have a good day, everyone.